when business owners acquire other companies, it makes the whole entity worth a lot more. When you grow your EBITDA levels, so your bottom line earnings, so too does the multiple that the business is valued off of.
Hey, well, thank you for joining us today. So today I've got a special guest with me, Max Webster from Vemos M&A Advisory out of Vancouver. And so, Max, why don't you just take a minute and just introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Jason. So my name is Maxwell Webster. I'm from Vancouver, BC. Recently moved over to Vancouver Island. I come from a family of small business entrepreneurs, and I've always been into the entrepreneurial lifestyle. I started with, paper routes and dog walking businesses and lawn mowing, went into an apparel company in the latter half of my high school years, and then started a tourism business when I was 25 and really got the full-time small business entrepreneur bug, and then kind of fell into M&A by accident, really. And it's been a really great career path just because it allows me to learn about all these different industries and help different folks with their goals. And so it's a pleasure to be here and keen to chat about it.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Well, thanks for that great introduction. So you're an entrepreneur at heart, which is excellent.
Yeah. So, working with them on a daily basis, it really fills the cup.
Perfect. Well, so today, what we're going to be talking about is the difference between wealth harvesting and wealth creation as it relates to businesses. So, when we talk about that, what does that mean to you? Maybe you can just take a minute and explain that to the audience and let everyone know what we're going to be talking about today.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that, when people think about M&A or business brokerage, they think about selling businesses, and that would be the wealth harvesting. And that's typically what we do. We help small business owners sell their companies when the time is right. It's either through the desire to retire, burnout, looking to make a move in life to something different. And frankly, we're really good at that. But, you have conversations with different business owners over time, and you realize that some of them are talking to you because they've kind of nailed their business and they're looking for the next challenge. And in those types of situations, helping them acquire other businesses can be really exciting. And that's the wealth creation side, because when business owners acquire other companies, it makes the whole entity worth a lot more. When you grow your EBITDA levels, so your bottom line earnings, so too does the multiple that the business is valued off of. So it's a really great accretive way to build wealth for entrepreneurs, and they're in a really good position to do so because the banks love financing deals where, frankly, the best entrepreneur, the best person in the room is buying that company. They're setting that acquisition up for success. And so it's a really good way for them to continue to build wealth while doing the thing that they're really good at.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's quite interesting. So, how do you know if a business owner is ready to acquire another company? Like, what are the things that you would look for? What are you going to advise them on?
So, I mean, the simplest way to think about it is if their business is ready to be sold, they're likely in a good position to buy. So we look at it both from a financial side of things, but I think the more nuanced side of it is the intangibles, the risk related side of the transaction. So things like having an org chart where there's managers in place that you can, take a vacation, for example. That's a question we'll ask. How many vacations can you take? How long can you be away from the business before it's, one big tire fire? And if they say, well, we take a month vacation in the winter and a month vacation in the summer, it's a pretty good indication that they have their house in order. But a good way of comparing it is you're not going to have a party before your house is tidy, and so you have to kind of have that house tidy before you go out and make that next acquisition. So we'll usually start by analyzing the business that is going to be the acquiring entity first for that, and then kind of advise that they might be ready for another transaction.
Oh, that's quite interesting. And so, this transaction, when they go and they are looking at buying another business, um, how long? Like, what does that look like? And does it take a few years to go and find another business? And once they do find the business, how long are you finding that they hang on to this other business before they package it all up and sell it off as as one entity?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways. Sometimes we're working with families that don't have any plans to sell that larger entity at the end of the day. And sometimes we're working with folks that, they have 5 to 10 years of gas in the tank still. And so they want to grow that pie and before being ready to sell. Frankly, it works for both of those equally as well. You're going to need to have an appetite for a year-long process to make an acquisition, likely. Like if we're looking from the sell side, we typically say it takes 6 to 9 months to sell a business. So we have to start by, going out and searching and building those relationships and building the trust with the target companies first. So it typically will take a little bit longer. But that generally speaking is kind of the framework that we work within.
Okay. No, that's cool. And then what does a successful integration look like? Because you've got the culture within your current company, and you're going to be buying another company that likely has a completely different culture. So how do you make sure that those companies integrate seamlessly and going forward that that it works for everybody?
Yeah, so the benefits to the way that we operate it is if we're looking at the buyer as first we look at them as a seller. So do they have their house in order, right? Do they have their org chart in a place that it's sellable? Do they have their financials in a way that they can be presented well to the bank and to other targets? And then from there, we're running the same test on that company as the targets. So we can kind of look at overlap. Where are the redundancies? Where do they both perform well? Where are there any areas where they both don't perform well? So for example, if they're, both owner operator companies, well, what's going to happen when one of those owner goes away in a transaction? You're going to have someone working 80, 90, 100-hour weeks. That's not sustainable, right? So there's certain factors if one's on still on paper and one has a fully fledged CRM, well, that can work because they're gonna one's gonna adopt into the other and they're gonna merge ideally a little bit more seamlessly than if they're kind of on competing platforms.
Okay. Okay. So how would someone know that growth by acquisition is something that they want to do? Like, how would you identify that? Or if someone's watching this, they're thinking, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. What should they be considering? I'm just wondering how someone would know that this is something that they should pursue.
It's a great question, and I think that oftentimes those folks already know and they're coming to us, but in the scenario that it typically happens for us is we will either start the conversation or they will start the conversation about selling. And we'll quickly identify, hey, this is an entrepreneur that has a ton of gas in the tank still. There's a lot of passion. They have a really strong business and they don't know what they want to do afterwards. And if they don't know what they want to do afterwards, the actual likelihood that that transaction goes through, because frankly, it's not an easy 6 to 9 months to sell a business. While we'll shoulder most of the load, there's a lot of work that's still required from the business owner themselves. So oftentimes we'll sort of transition that conversation into, have you thought of this? And being a business owner previously that wasn't in M&A, I had never thought about selling my business. I just thought, oh, I'm just going to run this business until I retire and walk away from it. And now I think about that, that's ridiculous. But that's how a lot of small business owners think. And so we have to educate them on not just the flashy selling the business, but what are your full suite of options from an M&A perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think there is an opportunity. I think with a lot of aging business owners out there, a lot of business owners looking to exit their business, there is an opportunity for people who are looking to buy and expand, like what you talked about. So, yeah, no, that's exciting and interesting. So, is there any other ideas or words of wisdom that you would have for our audience today on that? Buying another company to grow the size of it?
Well, I think that, you know, I would say safely there's 10 buyers for every one seller. So from a sell side of the market, it's a great time to be selling. And we don't want to discourage folks from doing that feel like they're kind of at the end of their life cycle with the business. But if you are a business owner, let's just say you own an HVAC company and there's another HVAC company that's for sale. You are the best buyer for that company. You also have the most to gain because there's operational efficiencies that you can see when you merge two similar companies, right? You don't need to have two of everything. That you can instantly make your operating entity more profitable. And banks are able to finance oftentimes up to 100% of what the proceeds of that transaction would be, assuming there's some vendor note, like there's some skin in the game from the selling business owner. But there's, we have precedent transactions where this has been the case. So it doesn't take a lot of financial outlay for these more strategic types of buyers to go out and grow their, pie, so to say. It just takes a business that has a lot of strength in its foundation before going out and doing so. Like I had mentioned, you don't have a party before your house is tidy. Once your house is tidy, and we can help educate folks on when that time is, it's a really great way to, have a great last act in your career.
Yeah, for sure. So banks will fund up to 100% if there's a vendor note. That's interesting. I didn't realize that that's the case, and that makes it even more attractive.
Yeah, so I mean, there's one caveat to that. That would be 100% of whatever the cash on close is. So typically in a deal where, maybe it's 80% cash on close and 20% vendor note, which is basically the business owner, the seller acting as a bank to the buyer. There's always going to need to be that piece. Banks will require it 100% of the time in Canada. If the business owner is willing to do that, oftentimes the seller will be able to um, leverage that.
Nice. That's interesting. So obviously the company that you're buying, you want to make sure that it's a well-run operation as well. You don't want to have something that's going to be a disaster that you have to spend months or years trying to fix and get organized. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement. Yeah, we're going to do the same analysis we would do on the buyer to begin with on every single target. And we're not going to advise on a less than optimal business being acquired to begin with, because for many different reasons. A, it's not in their best interest, but B, the banks will sniff that out too. And the deal's not likely going to go through. So we need to make sure that that's all going to be in place. And then in addition to that, usually less than optimal businesses don't really have a very reliable org chart. And so when they are going through that acquisition process, it's going to be identified. And you need to think about it from the buy side of it. If you're looking at the target's org chart, all of those folks are going to need to have somebody that they're reporting to. So from the buyer's side, you need to look at your own org chart and think, well, who's reporting to who, and how am I motivating these people to take on more risk, more responsibility in their own roles? Do I need to, increase their pay? Do I need to give them a piece of the pie? That's a real consideration, because, you hear these horror stories of one business buying another, but they haven't really thought that through yet. And then these folks that aren't at the, shareholder status level are just asked to do more work for the same amount of pay. And it ends up being a bit of a disaster. So we try and help avoid some of those pitfalls, both from a transition perspective and then deal terms perspective.
Okay. So that's interesting. So you'll help the not only find the business, but as I'm listening to you, I'm feeling like you also help them to integrate that business. So coach the owners on how to integrate the two businesses together and work with them to make sure that there's that's seamless.
Yeah. So I mean, on a kind of a high level, when we run each target through sort of a risk analysis, is what we would call it. There's going to be things that they're great at, and there's going to be things that they're not great at. No business gets, A plus on those types of breakdowns. And so in order to address those less than optimal items, the areas where they're not scoring very high, there's deal terms for every single one, right? Like there's ways to mitigate that risk. So if there's, for example, key concentration at the management level, there might need to be some contracts signed within the due diligence period to make sure that those folks are retained. There might need to be an earnout related to the highest concentrated customer. Like if they have a customer that represents 25% of their revenue every year, well, if you lose that customer right as the transition is happening, there goes the profitability, right? So there needs to be certain measures in place, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to say, if you're motivated to make this deal, if you're willing to accept these risk items, here's how we'll mitigate those. Because every single business buyer, every single entrepreneur in general has a different risk appetite, and some might have bigger risk than others. Some industries, for example, have client concentration no matter what, because there's big players, there's huge suppliers, and that's just something that folks have to accept. But there's ways that we can mitigate it.
This has been a great educational overview. We reach out to you when we have clients that are looking to sell their business and when we have clients that are looking to grow through acquisition. So thank you for taking the time to run through this with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jason. Obviously, growing your business is a huge objective of a lot of business owners, and growing through acquisition is one of the most high leverage ways to do so. You can not overnight, but in that 6 to month time frame, be growing millions of dollars on your top line or bottom line. So we're really excited to help entrepreneurs with these objectives, and be an extension of their business as a corporate development M&A type partner, so that they can continue focusing on what they're good at, and we can help them with the growth objectives. So I appreciate you having us on, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Excellent. Great. Well, thank you. So, if anybody wants to reach out to Max, what I'll do is I'll include his email and his website in the comment section or in our bio, and you can feel free to reach out to Max. You can also reach out to us. So, at 360 Wealth, we work with business families and physicians, helping them with all their finances, making sure that they can maximize their life's work. So, thank you for joining us. Thanks, Max. I appreciate your time.